You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Where'd the old town go? They moved it all north of here in a shopping mall.
Good morning and welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on WOOP FM 99.9 or on the internet at www.woopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. Good morning, Debbie. Tell us about what's happening today.
Good morning, Ron. It's September the 21st, 2013, and we have a lot of rain this morning. And that's very unfortunate for you guys who were going to go down and see the polo matches at the Bendabout Farms today because they have had to cancel today's matches. But tomorrow at 2 p.m. they hope that we'll have enough clear weather that we can play polo again. Ron and I went down last weekend. He had never been to a match, and he absolutely loved it.
Those horses run really fast. It's pretty amazing.
They get side by side, and what did you estimate, Ron? 35 miles?
35-40 what they were saying, and they all have almost as much wrecks as they do in dirt track racing, Mike.
I don't.
Those horses run into each other, and they hit the other horses with mallets, and people get mad. And that happens at racetracks sometime too, don't it, Mike?
Still the driver.
Still the driver.
The horses would not hit each other if it wasn't for the driver.
That's right. Well, we have with us today, folks, someone that I've been trying to get to come on the show for a while now, and this is Mike Bell, and it's not Senator Mike Bell from this area.
Thank goodness.
It is a new friend of ours, Mike Bell, and he is a historian of racing. And I bumped into him while we're making this little documentary that we're putting together, and he's going to be sharing a lot of knowledge today about the Georgia racers and about some of the folks up in Tennessee, too, because he says he doesn't know much about Tennessee, but he surely does. And we have a picture up on the screen right now. Mike, who is that?
Well, that's Mr. Harold Fryer. That's a car he and Billy built, if I remember correctly. That's out at Chattanooga when Chattanooga was paved. Boyd Speedway. They called it Chattanooga International Raceway at the time. Otis Gaither ran it. I believe it was 64, 65, somewhere along in there. Mm-hmm. He won a lot of races in that car, not only on the asphalt, but on the dirt, because in those days, guys only built one car. They just kind of changed the tires, and they just went from one to the other.
Now, Boyd started, 52? Do you remember that?
September of 52.
And they ran dirt until when?
62. Mr. Boyd paved it in 62 with the promise of getting the Allison Brothers and Red Farmer up here in what we called at the time modified specials, which were the old coupes with fuel-injected Chevrolet engines in them and things like that. They ran on Thursday night at the time. Then they ran it Friday night at Huntsville. And there was a little track that opened in Birmingham called Dixie Speedway in Midfield. They ran Saturday night at Montgomery and Nashville, and then ran Sunday afternoon at the fairgrounds in Birmingham.
Now, when did they switch back to dirt? Do you remember? I know in 72 they were still running asphalt, I think, weren't they?
I believe it was 73 or 74. Yeah. The track could not get successful running asphalt. Mr. Boyd's actually closed the place, and Otis Gaither took it over and went to what they call a modified late model, which is similar to the car that Harold's got there, only the bigger bodies, not the small body like the Chevy Nova.
Mike, for the folks that aren't watching on the internet, what kind of car is that?
That's about a 62 Chevrolet Chevy Nova, or Chevy 2 as they were called. They were, I don't think they ever sold this car until later years with a V8 in it. It only had a 4-cylinder and a 6-cylinder in it. for the street. You know,
Right.
when people drove it on the street.
So tell us about Harold Fryer there. Everywhere I go and ask, especially people that raced in the 50s and the 60s, it's the first name that comes out of their mouth usually.
Well,
Why is that, Mike?
what you have to do is look at the arms on that man. To drive a race car in those days, you had to have some arms, and he is a stockily built man, just like his dad was. I was told by Freddie that their dad actually raced in the 20s. I don't know whether he actually did or not. I haven't done the research yet, but Harold started as a teenager in the 40s driving. He got so good that they would drive all the way to Birmingham to the old, what was called the Iron Bowl Speedway. Now, it was a circle. It wasn't an oval, folks. It was a circle. And you had to drive 100% of the time. There was no resting. And you needed arms like that to be able to drive in a circle for 50 laps. And that's what they did. And
Now,
he would win down there, too. Now, Billy tried to drive, but if you've ever seen Billy, Billy was maybe 5'4", probably weighed at the height 140, 150 pounds. So as a driver, Billy was not built to be a driver. Harold was built to be a driver.
now, Harold, I understand also, of course, I've seen ads with putting the bounties out on Harold and Freddie. But now, Harold used to play to the crowd a little bit, wouldn't he?
Harold was a promoter's dream.
He was WWF in racing.
Well, now, in all honesty, Freddie was a Golden Gloves boxer when he was in high school.
Yeah.
Freddie was?
Freddie was. Harold wasn't. Harold was probably the backyard boxer more than anything. You'll have to remember, if my memory serves me correctly, he married R.G. Nethery's daughter. And if you know R.G. never raced in his life, but he built more race engines than anybody in the world. He used to build one heck of a flathead. He would get big money for building a flathead. But Harold raced in '49. He was already known around as the stock car driver from Chattanooga. And after that, there was just a ton of guys from Chattanooga that used to go everywhere to race.
I understand he used to throw bubble gum out to the kids, and he had a crown and a cape.
He used to also carry the kids around after the races in the car. That was the biggest thing in the world, you know. After the races, they didn't put they didn't have trailers in those days. You hooked up a tow bar to the car and what we call flat towed it on back home. And he would put the kids in the car and drive them around the track. Because a lot of the cars in those days, the door's still open. They hadn't started welding the door shut. If you look at that Nova, everything's welded together, and that's for safety more than anything. That was one of the things they found out first, was that we need to keep the doors shut because you're liable to fall out. There were no lie now. There were several guys that were killed because they fell out of the race car when it turned over.
Wow. And now, Freddie was a pretty good driver too, was he?
Oh, good, yes, sir, yes, sir. He was. He raced from about. I think he said he started in '52 at what was called Fort Oglethorpe Speedway, which was over. It's a church site now, which is kind of ironic when you think about racing. But he drove. I think he said it was a '37 Plymouth. It's one of the few cars he does not have a picture of. Oh. So if anybody has a picture of Freddie Fryer with his first race car, he'd love to have it. Lives in Cassville, Missouri. He and his wife.
Next time you know he's coming to this way, I need to record him again. I recorded him down at the Georgia reunion, and it was raining cats and dogs and frogs and lizards that day.
So all you hear is rain.
It sounds like he's in a popcorn machine talking to me, and everything he said was wonderful. He was talking about Harold and the crowds and how he got he got started. He was about 13, he said, and Harold would let him go out and iron out the track. And then Freddie got a little bit brave, and he was running faster than ironing the track out than Harold was running in his car. And Harold walked out in the middle of the track and stopped him, told him, get out of his car, go get your own car. You can race now. And that's the story that Freddie tells, much better than that.
Mike, I started going down to the Cleveland Speedway, grew up behind the Cleveland Speedway, and remember them driving the 55 Chevrolets, Harold and Freddie, and Of course, Jerry Meadows and different things like that, and that was just, there's nothing greater to see those old 55 Chevrolets run. That's still my favorite to see those. I still like the cars that look like cars. Not, the newer things today don't interest me as much as the old real race cars.
Well, that was the interest. That's the way Bill France started everything, was the idea that he put a car on the racetrack that looked like the car in the showroom, that you would be driving down the street or driving to work. You wouldn't necessarily be rooting for that driver. You'd be rooting for that 52 Oldsmobile or that 51 Hudson or whatever. Then it got to be where the drivers were more or less like rock stars, and Fireball Roberts was essentially the first one.
Yeah.
Where was
I know
he
my
from?
dad bought a 62 Pontiac Grand Prix because of Fireball
That's
Roberts.
right.
And I remember they had to go in and change something on the throttle of the gas tank so it would take gas faster, and so it had to come out on the cars too. So my dad went and bought one of those things, put more gas in it faster. Like, that was really a concern for my dad, but he needed to get in there faster and out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So
And we wish we still had that car.
That would happen to be the fastest car I think I'd ever seen in my life. And he proved it coming back from Atlanta one night. And Judy Pogue down in Chatsworth, that used to be the sheriff down there, Sheriff Judy. Judy's guy. He talked to Dad about how fast he's going through Chatsworth. So I remember that as a little boy too. Went to Atlanta and come back and got caught. All right.
Going through Chatsworth.
Yes,
Mhm.
411.
A long time ago, bfor the interstate.
That's 411 coming up through that way. And my mom's from Murray County, so Judy knew all of us, but still had to go back down to the old jail there and had to.
That's when you followed them back to the jail and paid them.
Had to contribute to the economy of Chatsworth that night. Yeah.
Let's take just a moment here to mention that we have one of the biggest car shows probably in this area for hundreds of miles today at Westwood Baptist Church up on Highway 60 on Georgetown Road. It's free and open to the public. They open up at 11 a.m. this morning to 3 p.m. I think even rain or shine, most of the cars will be out. I haven't heard any differently. So please go up there and support them up at Westwood campus. It's free. Just go on up and see them. And here on Thursday nights at the Bistro, we have Shane Lowe that plays live music from 5 to 8 p.m. And on Wednesday nights, you can see Joe Collins, little JoJo Collins. He's not little anymore, is he?
JoJo's not little anymore, no.
6 to 9 p.m. But both of those are some great entertainment, so come out and support them too.
Mike, I know can you think of, from Gatlinburg to Dawsonville, what tracks used to be around and they're gone now?
Or still there. I mean, what
good
kind
heavens,
of...
good heavens, believe it or not. Well, we've been told, we never have been able to substantiate it, but there were a couple of tracks cut in cornfields there in Dawson County, back before the war, when the moonshiners were trying to figure out who had the fastest car.
Now, Gordon says he was.
And
Gordon swears to that, but it...
Well,
and he tells a good story.
Yeah, and he probably knows. It's just that he's
No
gotten
one put
like
it
the
in.
rest of us. He's gotten so old, he's forgotten exactly where.
But he tells the same lie every time now. Though.
Yeah.
No,
That's good.
actually, he tells a really good story, and I think that probably it's just not something that you put in the newspaper that the moonshiners are out racing in the field, and so
Yes.
there's just not any documented evidence that it happened.
Well,
but we all know it happened.
Nobody was invited.
Yes.
In all honesty, it was the moonshiners. It was their own little party. And then somebody would find out and they'd show up, and somebody would find out and they'd show up. And then one or two of them, well, Frank Christian was one of them, decided, hey, we could probably make some money off of this. So they wound up holding races.
What, Parks, was that the other guy's name?
Raymond Parks.
Right.
Mr. Parks, Frank Christian. Frank Christian owned the first Chevrolet that won a Grand National race, NASCAR race, the top premium division of NASCAR. In 1955 is when they started with their overhead valve engines. In 1955, Fonnie Flock drove for it.
Yeah.
Fontella Flock was his real name. Wherever they came up with that name, I'll never know.
Well, they were the whole Flock family. The
Yeah, I know.
Flock brothers.
There was Reno, who was the oldest daughter, She was a wing walker, by the way, and I guess you could say a barnstormer with biplane. There was Fonnie and Tim. Bob, I think, was the oldest son. I'm not sure. Bob, from everybody you talk to that are now gone, Bob was the best driver. The only problem was Bob broke his back twice, not once but twice in a race car. And the second time he broke his back, he decided he'd had enough.
Well, which one of them, Mike, had a monkey?
That was Tim. Now, wait a minute. Now, that was Jocko Flacco.
Oh, excuse me. Jocko Flacco.
Jocko Flacco. And he had him in a little cage in the car, and he was his mascot. Well, during some race, and I forget where it was, he got out of the cage and was going crazy in the car. And Tim made a pit stop just to get rid of the monkey. He didn't need any gas or any tires or anything. He said, I got to get rid of this monkey. He's driving me crazy. Oh, he used to tell stories about Jocko.
Well, there's cute pictures of Jocko, and Jocko had picked up a bad habit of smoking too,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's got his little helmet on, his little racing helmet on, and he's smoking a cigarette. So I'm definitely going to we're going to have to include that somehow in our documentary. I don't know, but
But
Well, we started to nominate Jocko to the Georgia Racing Hall of Fame. But we don't figure he'll have enough support from his fans to get in.
they won't get enough
you
votes.
never know now. Now there used to be at Warner Park in Chattanooga used to be a racetrack years ago.
I actually found an article from 1919. I was hunting for information on a guy named Arthur Thurman, who was from Flintstone, Georgia, who died in the Indianapolis 500 in 1919. Very bad crash. But in looking at the newspapers in May, they had the very first automobile sanctioned race in 1919 at Warner Park. It was the IMCA. And a guy named Fred Ory won it. Y'all probably don't know Fred. Fred quit in the early 30s and just kind of dropped out of sight.
Now it would be where Warner Park Zoo is now.
Mr. Abercrombie, Richard Abercrombie, was a good friend of mine. He died a couple of years ago and probably should have been on this show. Richard knew more about racing in Chattanooga than anybody. But he carried a friend of mine, Eddie Samples, whose dad was a national champion, and I out to Warner Park and showed us the layout. And you can tell kind of where it was because a lot of the pictures that you see from Warner Park, there's a railroad track in the background. The train track are still there. Mm-hmm. So that part of Warner Park was where the racetrack was.
I think I do have a picture of Warner Park with a race running there.
We have a picture that I believe Doc Sherman gave us of motorcycle racing there.
Oh, they did all kinds of racing. It was originally built for horse racing, of course. It was flat.
All right.
Moccasin Bend. But the
Moccasin Bend was a racetrack that was built after Mr. Boyd. Mr. Boyd had so much success at Boyd Speedway of 52. There were some bootleggers in town, and I never have gotten to who their names were, got together and pooled some money and built a racetrack called Moccasin Bend. It's supposedly still there. The layout, you can see the layout of the racetrack.
I understand that you can still see the banks.
Yeah.
It's what the people from the National Park Service told me.
Yeah, but see, it's all fenced in now,
Yeah.
and you can't get down to where it was. The river was behind the grandstands in Moccasin Bend.
I have a Xerox picture of it, but I don't have an original picture of it. Billy Fryer gave me a Xerox copy.
Billy had a real good aerial photograph of it.
That's what I have. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. And when I showed it to Doc German, he went, "Yeah, I raced there." And he told me what it looked like when you drove in and how it was laid out and such. Hey, we woke up the
Already.
phones.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hello, Ron and Debbie.
Hey, Miss Ella, how are you?
I'm fine, and it's raining cats and dogs right now.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Did you go to Pokey's last night?
No, I didn't have no way. My son didn't come down, so nobody would take me.
So you just got drunk at home?
No, I just stayed home.
Oh, okay.
So,
She only drinks socially.
That's right.
that's right.
Well, you know that you're a good customer when they got a table named after you at a bar.
Well,
And And especially when your family calls hunting for you at the bar. I've had that done. I know what you mean. My family was hunting me one night because my parents came up from Florida. I live in Georgia. And they called and called and called my apartment and never could get me to answer. And my cousin said, well, you're calling the wrong place. You got to call this number right here and just leave a message. He'll get back to you. And it was a bar called Hemingway's. And I used to go there every Friday and Saturday night. Sometimes during the week when I felt bad.
And then it started every night.
I guess I'll have to wait for payday.
Oh, no. Payday. That's a long time off.
Well, they're still getting my shirt and T-shirts ready. I hope they have them ready pretty soon.
Well, Mike, now she is a cougar, though. She likes younger men.
Is she?
Yeah.
Well, I'm an old guy.
Well, no, but Mike, we're probably in her age range, though. You know, she's 74, so she can go on down anywhere below 74.
74, no more, Ron.
Uh-oh, you're 76?
I'm 75.
Oh, 75, okay. Yeah, so, well,
Oh, Miss Ella.
you stay out of the rain today.
Bye, sweetie. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Miss Ella always makes me laugh. Oh, okay. Let's.
But now,
So go
ahead. Other racetracks, can you remember up through Tennessee and Georgia? I mean, well, now we only got to mention dirt track racing. People are talking. Good morning, live on Old Town Cleveland. Hello.
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 This is T. Bandy.
Hey, T. Bandy.
Do you have a fish truck today, T?
Gonna have a fish truck if it don't drown before he gets here.
Yeah, we don't get our fish wet today, do we?
And will that start at 11 o'clock?
Yeah, it's supposed to be here at 11 o'clock.
Okay. If anybody's ordered fish for your pond from T down at the Bradley Farmers Co-op, they're going to be delivered today at 11 o'clock. Just get on down there. You'll be there like from 11 to 12.
11 to 12. They don't have to have no order. Just come on down.
There
So
you go.
If you want a good grass carp, you just go on down there today, and they'll put it in a bag for you, right?
Yeah, that's right. Put them in the bag, yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks, T.
Yeah.
Good luck, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We had to take care of official business.
Official
Yes,
business.
well-
But, racetracks, these, gosh.
Okay,
Wait,
today's
wait a minute.
magic word's going to be racetrack because every time
Good
you
morning,
say
you're
it,
live
the
on
fun's
Old Town
gonna
Cleveland.
Hello.
Hello.
My butt is getting wet. He's at the market. He's got purple hull peas. He's got greens. He's got onions. He's got tomatoes. He's got a whole bunch of stuff.
And,
Sweet potatoes.
and tell him where he is now.
He's on Peerless Road. He's a Korean veteran.
Hey, Miss Bernice, did you ever watch the races?
Yes,
Where did you go to see races?
I went down there off of South Lee Highway and watched the races once. Scared the dickens out of me. But I love you guys.
Love you too, Miss Bernice. Don't get too wet. Bye-bye. Oh, Lordy.
Now,
Other racetracks.
yes.
I actually found an ad in the Chattanooga papers for a racetrack at Soddy Daisy. There was an old friend of mine, Ivan Stevens, and I don't know how Ivan is doing. He lives in Athens. He told me about a racetrack that was called Midway Speedway.
Yes.
It was midway between Athens and Etowah.
Right. It closed about 54 when Cleveland opened. I think
Yeah.
it ran for about 2 years.
Ran for about 2 years. There was a racetrack in Fort Oglethorpe that a guy named Indian Joe Martin ran. They called him Indian Joe because he was an Indian motorcycle man. He loved Indian motorcycles.
Good morning, you're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Mr. Ron. How you doing?
Hey there, Bullet.
Does anybody know when that racetrack first started down at Cleveland Speedway?
April 54, isn't it?
That's right.
Well, my father actually took me there back in '58. I was 10 years old, and we were standing outside looking through the crack, and there's a car running through the fence. If my father hadn't grabbed me and moved, I probably wouldn't be here now.
Oh.
And I never will forget that. But back then they didn't care, but now I think they got it blocked for you can't. I wouldn't want to stand there anyway.
Well, they got signs that says don't stand here. Right?
But back then they didn't hardly care. But I'll tell you what, I learned my lesson.
That's right. Mr. Bullet, you need to come by and see me after the show, okay?
Okay, we'll see.
All right, bye-bye. Oh, that's funny. So we had Indian Joe at Fort Oglethorpe.
Yeah. Actually, his son still lives here in town, Chico Martin. And then there were 2 racetracks in Dalton. One was called Dalton Speedway, of course. The Newberry family had it. It was on their farm out off of Highway 76. And then there was a unique racetrack called Mountain View Spillway Speedway, which was over behind where the hospital is now on Highway 41. It was kind of a unique racetrack in that it had a creek that ran across it. There were several other racetracks around the country that had that same thing. But that
literally across the track itself?
Yes, sir. As you go to the old site now and you look down what used to be the third turn, there's a little pond there. And that pond is fed by that creek that starts in the middle of the racetrack and runs out of the racetrack.
So did you have different tires when you went down there?
No, you just well, in those days nobody had different tires. In all honesty, there was no such thing as racing tires. Everybody ran tires from the street. You'll see some pictures because some guys got the bright idea of grooving across the tire. Their standard tires. Racing tires didn't exist. Well, they did for Indianapolis, but they didn't for regular short track racing until like the 60s. So most of these guys are see those tires on the back of that car?
That's Jack Cunningham in number 32. I believe
those
that's at Boyd's.
Those are just regular tires. Now, the wheels are special, but those are just regular tires.
I believe
a lot of guys, like I say, would groove across them so they would dig the track better, but those were just regular tires.
Let me ask you a
It's probably
question.
cheaper to run a car back then, too, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. A car like that right there, you could now. You got to realize now, this is not that much money to us today.
Mm-hmm.
But for less than $400, you could put a car like that on the racetrack and be a winner. The only problem was you were only making $30 a week.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to cobble everything together with used parts, go to the junkyard and beg and borrow and get your friends to give you this, give you that, and half the time, most of the welding was done by guys. Oh, he'll weld these in for us. They buy him a 6-pack of beer and he'll weld it in there.
Mm-hmm. Ivan Stevens, let's go back to the Midway. Was that a flat track or did it have banks?
It had banks to
Okay.
it. It was built for automobile racing. It really
But it was just on whose farm was that?
I don't know. Ivan showed me where the track was, but I don't know whose farm that was.
Someone told me, and I've
It's
written
right
it down
off
somewhere.
the road that goes between the two cities.
I understand that it was just a fellow that ran a junkyard or something up there. And
Mr. Moss, the road superintendent, tells it's on County Road 619. Now, to us Bradley Countyans, that doesn't mean a lot.
Yeah.
But we know the general vicinity where it was at. But someone had told me they thought in the beginning it was just a flat oval that they had just kind of drawn out on the farm, and then it might have proceeded from there, and it closed down when Cleveland opened. But I don't think Mr. Stevens is in good condition, and but I understand he's got some nice scrapbooks I'd like to see.
Oh, yeah. I created them for you.
Oh, good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron.
Hey, Red.
I wanted to ask him, is there a dirt track race in Chatsworth?
You mean tonight?
No,
I doubt seriously,
Is
but
there a track there?
yes, ma'am. It's North Georgia Speedway.
Where is it at?
It's on Highway 225. If you'll go west out of Chatsworth on 76, about where the is it called the Van House? Is that what?
Yeah.
Right near where the Van House is. 225 runs into 76. Just take it south like you're going to Calhoun, and about 10 miles out of town is where it is.
Okay, I had heard about it, but I've been through there a million times. I've never seen it.
Well, actually, there's a little mini go-kart track across the street from it. It's called North Georgia Mini Speedway.
Mm-hmm.
Or last time I was there, it was called North Georgia Mini Speedway.
When do they run? Saturdays?
They run Saturday afternoons. The racetrack, the big racetrack, runs Saturday nights. They were supposed to run tonight, but I doubt seriously if they'll get it in.
They run every week?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks,
ma'am.
Red. Bye-bye.
Bye. So, I don't even know where the Chesney. My mom's from Murray County, but I don't even know where that racetrack is.
When you're going down the highway, if
I
you
know
go
where the
down-
Van House and all that is.
Well, when you take 225 and go south, it's like I say, they'll never build a subdivision next to this because it's about 15 miles out of Chatsworth. Chatsworth, they have to get to be the size of Chattanooga before it'll get close to the racetrack.
Right. Okay.
He built there was a gentleman, they used to call him Preacher. And he used to have church on Sunday morning, and on Sunday afternoon he'd have races.
Yeah. So,
And he built North Georgia.
Yes, ma'am.
Now I met Robert Kinsey. Did he run North Georgia? Is that what he ran?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I really need to get in touch with Robert. If you've got a contact
I
number.
do. I have his number.
Because he had some great scrapbooks. Everybody was telling me about his great scrapbooks.
Yes. The big problem with his scrapbooks, a lot of the pictures he had cut out of like program books.
Yeah.
And so they're not original. So when we scan them, they're not going to look great, but they're going to look good enough. And he had fabulous stories.
Oh, God, yeah.
He had fabulous stories, and I again recorded him in Georgia where the sound was so horrible. So I've got to go find him.
Mike, I think I told you earlier, is that we believe that there are only 9 dirt track racetracks still open in the state of Tennessee.
I
What
think
about
there's
Georgia?
more than that. What do you think?
It probably is. It fluxes from year to year, anywhere from probably 16 to 20.
Okay.
There's 2 or 3 that are in East Tennessee that are running really well. Tazewell.
That's Smoky Mountain.
Wartburg. I don't know what Tazewell is. I've been told it's like northeast of Knoxville, about 40 or 50 miles.
It's out in the middle of nowhere.
It's out in the middle of
Well,
nowhere.
there's one there in Seymour or the
Seymour,
Great
Smoky Mountain.
Then
Smoky
Tazewell would be
Mountain
at
Raceway.
Bucksport.
Now, see, it's been off and on asphalt and dirt. So that's where Ivan got hurt real bad. He was in a coma for 3 months after the wreck.
And what decade would that be when Ivan got hurt? Ivan Stevens.
In 67.
67.
He laid in a coma for 3 months. And they started these scrapbooks, and that's where I helped him at. He had these photo albums, and the doctor had his family make these photo albums to try and jog his memory about people that he raced with. And that was how he got his memory back, is he would look at these pictures. And every now and then when you'd show him a picture, he would not remember it. Because he had a picture, he said it was from 56 or 58, of him pulling his car into Cleveland Speedway, because he used to race at Cleveland. And he raced at Boyd's. He was a 58 Boyd's champion. That's when Jack Smith was supposedly the promoter there. Mr. Boyd was so fond of Jack, he let Jack Smith be the promoter of his speedway in 58. But Boyd's is across the line, so it's not exactly in Tennessee. Cleveland, Volunteer Speedway, Wartburg.
Where was Volunteer?
It still runs.
Somewhere near Gatlinburg. I don't know exactly where. It's a really high bank track. I've heard it is fast as the devil.
Atomic?
Atomic is gone.
Is it gone now?
I mean,
that was Oak Ridge, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like this table right here. It's flat. It's all
Ray
gone.
County over Dayton?
Yeah.
Is it still there?
I don't know if Dayton is still there or not. Crossville, I think, is still there. There's one.
I think Ron's confusion is sometimes they list them as dirt tracks, and
Or
then they
clay.
have them list them as clay tracks. And so when you put them all together, you have the 20 or so. Yeah.
Hey, good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Now, one of the fastest tracks around is Bulls Gap.
That's Volunteer. Yes, sir. Bulls Gap, Tennessee is where it is.
Who are we talking to?
This is Big Wheel.
Hey, Big Will. Go ahead.
And then there's Murphy up off of exit 60. I don't know if it's still running or not. It was a half mile.
Oh, it was bigger than a half mile. I was told it was like a 5/8.
Oh, yeah. But a lot of folks didn't want to go there because they kept blowing engines.
Well, that's the reason the big half-mile racetracks are no longer in existence anymore. They're motor killers. If you're a weekly racer, making it to the racetrack week to week is one thing you want to do, is race every week. But if you go to those half-mile racetracks and race every week, you're going to wear your motor out just in a half mile.
Yeah, that's why the NHRA and IHRA have gone to 1,000 feet instead of a quarter.
That's right. Right. They've gone to 1,000 feet instead of a quarter mile.
Cleveland Speedway has always been one of my favorite things to do.
Well, it started out as a quarter-mile racetrack, and they made it a 3/8. 3/8 seems to be the ideal size for racetracks. Most all the racetracks you have now. See, Boyd started out as a quarter mile. It's now 3/8. Golden Isle down in Brunswick, Georgia, was one of the fastest, if not the fastest, 5/8 in Southeast. It's now 3/8 a mile racetrack.
Does Dixie still run a half?
Dixie's a 3/8 mile racetrack. Rome is a half mile, and it is not quite a half mile. I think it's Oh, it's almost a half mile, but it is fast, and I love that place. That's the best racetrack in the Southeast.
You got more lanes to pass there.
Boy, do you ever. All you got to do is have guts enough to do it.
That's the only thing about Cleveland. And they used to run some day races, but in a day race at Cleveland, it became a one groove track.
Well, that's because of the red clay. The sun would bake out. It'd have to be a overcast day on a day race for it to be a decent race. Because that's what happened to Lakewood Speedway in Atlanta. They'd have a Sunday race, and the dirt was so old it would not hold the water. The sun would bake the water out of it, and you get down to about 80 miles into the race, and you can't even see the back straightaway. It's dusting so bad.
Yeah. The dirt tracks, I think it's the most competitive racing out there.
Who is this we're talking to?
It's Big Wheel.
Do you have any pictures of those racetracks?
No. When I win, I either help somebody or just sat in the stands.
Okay, well, that's what I sat in the stands and ate hot dogs. I was very good at it, too.
Yeah.
Racetrack steaks. They're not hot dogs.
Oh, okay.
Racetrack steaks.
There you go. But the old Cleveland Speedway people, it was amazing. And all those 55 Chevrolets got beat to death.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I loved them.
They raced them to death.
That's it.
I had a guy from Louisiana call me one time. He wanted to do a half-hour TV show on old race cars. Wanted to know where I could get some. I told him, I says, they've all been raced to pieces. You can't find any of them. There's none left. You have to build your own. And the first 55 Chevrolet you build into a race car nowadays, every restoration man in the country will have a warrant on you.
Exactly. I'll never forget Dennis Bailey had a Corvair, and I bet you couldn't put a 5-inch circle on any straight metal on that car. But he told me that night, he told me one night, said, they all look good out front, though.
Well,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You probably saw Gordon Jones race out of Dalton, Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
He drove a Corvair at Cleveland Speedway, won a championship race there.
There was a lot of Corvairs that were running Cleveland.
Yeah. Then they outlawed them because they were too short.
What happened to the Studebakers? Could they race Studebakers?
Oh, anybody could race Studebakers.
Well, I just had a couple
If
of
you
old
could
racers.
afford to race a
A
Studebaker, right?
couple of old racers that told me they raced them until they wouldn't let them race it anymore.
Well,
And-
in Grand National, see, the NASCAR Grand National, you're only available to use the 3 latest years of cars.
Oh,
Now,
okay, that's
now
probably
they changed
it.
that.
And
changed
once
that
it got
in
into the 60s, see, the Studebaker was a compact car in the 60s. They went strictly a compact car in the 60s. They had a V8 Chevrolet engine in them, but they went compact car. And the wheelbase was too short for Grand
Okay,
National
that makes
racing.
sense. That makes sense because they tell me how much they love driving the Studebaker, but they wouldn't let me drive them anymore. And I'm thinking, okay,
Now,
go ahead, Big Wheel.
They changed that NASCAR car rule
Oh, I don't doubt that.
because there was nothing for Petty to race. And it was a Chrysler product. So they extended it so he could run the 73 for a couple more years.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys a question here. You know, the 55 Chevy was just the classic old dirt track car. How come there was no 55 Fords?
A Ford engine, the bottom end of a Ford engine was garbage. If you put high compression pistons and a 292, I believe it was, to try to run a 292 high compression engine, you would blow the crank off the bearing bounce. That's what I've been told. You cannot take an old Y-block Ford and do that because the weak length of the car was the crankshaft bolted to the block. It was terrible.
Well, they only had two bolts.
Yeah, yeah. And see,
didn't have one
and everybody loved the flathead so much, but everybody'd also tell you need to replace the rods. You need to get bigger rods because the rods in a flathead Ford engine, and this is from Mr. Ford himself, he wasn't wasting any metal on big connecting rods. He made little old tiny connecting rods, and you would tear those things up all the time.
So he went for volume and not racing, right?
He went for volume of selling cars. He didn't care anything. Well, now, believe it or not, he got his start racing a car somewhere around Detroit City. And the city put up the prize money. He took that prize money and developed his own car. Then he got a guy named Barney Oldfield, who every racer in the world has ever heard of, to race a car. And if you've ever seen pictures of it, you have no idea. It did not have a steering wheel. It had a thing, I don't know what you'd call it, at the it was almost like a go-kart racing. It didn't really have a steering box at all. You actually pushed the axles with these levers he had. He must have had arms as big as most people's legs.
It's an amazing looking vehicle that he drove.
Would you have gotten in that car?
Not for love nor money.
I don't know many people that would have. And when you look at the old race cars from the early days, how did they get guys to sit in them? I was just amazed.
So now when they ran in, and today they don't look like cars. They just they can build any kind of, they got a frame and they got some kind of metal, sheet metal thing. But if you were driving a 55 Chevrolet, you had to have a 55 Chevrolet engine in it. Is that true?
Yeah. Until you got caught.
Yeah, okay.
See, the thing about it was 255 was a 265 Chevrolet engine, and they made those through 56. So sometimes if a guy blew his 55 Chevrolet engine up, he'd use a 56 265 in his 55. The reason everybody loves, because it really and truly, I like 55 Chevrolets, but a 57 is prettier than a 55 is, but it also weighs more. The 55 was the lightest, the 56 was a little bit heavier, and then the 57 was heavier still.
And the 57 had so many flat parts that you'd have to replace.
Yeah.
55s were easy to plow back out.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
In comparison. Y'all keep it real there on Old Town. I love your show, and I'll be listening every week.
Well, thank you. If you find any old information on any drivers, give us a call, because our documentary's scheduled to come out in April, and we still need to talk to drivers. We need pictures, 8mm films, and videos. So we've got some pretty good videos. We need some 8mm from that 50s, 60s, 70s era if we can.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much.
In recent days, Shorty Frazier's family has given us some video, and it's really nice to look through his pictures. And not so much on the video, but in the pictures, you see him starting out with that little hobby car and working his way up, and by the end he was up in the sportsman class, and you see the evolution of his racing career there. I have yet to find a picture of him going over the fence, though, down at Cleveland Speedway. I understand he did that.
We'd like to thank Terry Evans, who used to shoot a lot of video at racetracks. We found some of his footage. It's all 90s, but good footage when you're looking for video. We got a lot of pictures, but we still need more, Terry.
Terry's going to find us some stuff.
I
don't think we ever introduced Terry being here.
Terry Morrill's here. He's just sitting in wanting to listen today and everything. We're going to make him talk here in a minute, I think. Yeah. But he raced a few times around. And now let's before we go on, you're listening to Whoop FM 99.9, and we're talking about dirt track racing from, from Dawsonville to Gatlinburg today. We've been talking about it all the way down to Atlanta.
Now, Mike, do you have a website?
I'm in charge of, but I have not really done anything with GeorgiaRacingHistory.com.
Georgia Racing.
But you can go on there, and there's lots and lots of old archived articles and pictures to look at.
But
that's
I've
really
been
nice.
working, like I told you before, my right now is I've got a list of 122 people that I have documented that died racing in Georgia, or Georgians died racing elsewhere.
And you think that'll turn into a book someday?
Oh, definitely. Maybe 10 years.
Yeah, some of my books take that long, too. Good morning. You live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, you're on. This is
Hey.
Bob Cash.
Hey, Bob Cash.
Hey, Bob Cash. What's up, buddy?
How you guys doing?
We're good.
I just got out, got the radio turned on, and just wanted to say hello to Terry.
Hey, Terry, somebody's talking to you here.
Terry's hiding over in the corner. He waved at you.
Okay. Well, Terry, I love you, brother, and tell Daddy Doc I said hello, and I love him.
All righty, buddy. He's shaking his head yes now. He ain't quite got this radio thing down yet. He's waved at you and shook his head yes.
And I ran into somebody you knew the other day.
I'm sorry?
I ran into somebody you knew the other day, and he told terrible stories about you.
Who was that?
His name's Joey.
Oh, yes.
Pumpkin.
Hey, now, don't believe everything you hear now.
Well, now,
He's the younger one. I'm the prettier one.
you know what? I knew that with you out. You telling me that.
Yes.
And I knew already not to believe but half what he said and question that half.
Said what now, Ron?
I said I knew not to believe half of it and question the other half.
No, that's right, buddy. Well,
Thanks, Bob.
listen, good to talk with you guys, and I'll be listening, and I'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Mike, we just put another picture up here on the screen. Who is that? Do you know? Or if you don't know who it is, tell me what kind of car that is.
That's generally what was called a super modified.
Uh-huh.
They would take these old sprint cars and just hack them together with a roll bar system on top of it, because there were some guys, believe it or not, they drove those kind of cars called sprint cars in the early 50s without any roll bars whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what I've been told.
Midgets also. Midgets didn't have a single bar on them until the late 50s. And then they had a single little bar right behind the guy's head that was just what was called a rollover bar. And he was supposed to survive that if he rolled over with that little rollover bar.
Mm-mm.
That's maybe why your book is bigger as it is.
Yeah. Yeah. But,
because they didn't survive. Yeah.
That was probably taken out at Boyd's. In 1959, Mr. Boyd went to a run what you brung situation. You bring a race car, if it's got a motor, 4 tires, and brakes, and looks halfway safe, you could run it at Boyd's. And that's kind of what started all the craze that started around here, where they cut the bodies down and made little cars out of them.
Run what you brung. I like that.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yeah, this is a beautiful day for ducks.
Hey there, Ed.
Hey, Ed. What's up, buddy?
Good morning. I don't know. I'm afraid to stick my 2 cents worth in. I never did fool with them wide blocks of hole. I drove one on the road every day. It would run around the Mary Hill curve at about 100 and hold it. But on the track, I run flathead. I worked with Gene Norris when he run a flathead, run same engine for 8 years, and never did down it for bearings in 8 years. Turned pretty good, run 2 carburetors and alcohol, cammed. I guess that thing, I don't remember, punched about 160 over, 180 over. Run pretty good.
Did you drink any moonshine, Ed?
Never touched a drop.
Never?
Never, anyway.
Never dropped the drop, right?
Anyway, that was my good times. I enjoyed racing. I raced all over the United States on a real small budget. I let Uncle Sam pay my way when I was in the military. That's one thing kept me in the military, because he was paying me to move. And I ended up racing in Alaska and Highway of both. And most people didn't get a chance to do that. I hold a track record in Highway. The last count I had for a Stalker, 6-cylinder class, Chevrolet, downtown Honolulu. And we're since I'm on that, we are going to bring Highway to Bradley County the 28th at the Tavena School Reunion. Boy, I sneaked in that slick, didn't I?
Oh, I like the way you transitioned there.
Yeah, we need everybody to put on their grass skirt and their pretty shirt and wear a pineapple on your head if you want to, and just come on out and we're going to enjoy yourself. There's still people that's never made a reunion went to Tavena School. If you went there, I don't care if you went one day, come on, we're going to enjoy yourself. And it's just a couple of weeks away. Some way we miscued in the paper, don't look at that 21st. It's the 28th.
So that's next weekend then, right?
That's right, out here off of 64 Highway. You'll see a big sign. You can't miss it. It'll point right over there at the pavilion where we're going to have it at. Same place it was last year.
All right. Well, that's Trevina School, and that's from what, 1925 forward?
Yeah, up to when it closed, everything it was. I ain't got the date.
Gosh.
70,
71, maybe 70.
72, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, no, it was before then. It closed up in the 60s.
Oh, the 60, okay.
Anyhow, you get me on these dates, and I've done forgot most of them. Some of them I want to forget. But, yeah, I enjoyed my racing. The hardest race I ever done in my life was in West Texas on the sand. I'd never, a dirt track, and I'd never been introduced to that. Now, picture racing with 2 pieces of sandpaper on your face at, 60 or 70, 80 mile an hour. That was fun now. And the car took the same toll that I did. The dust and stuff off that sand was pitiful, and it got all in the engine. You didn't have to open your cylinder walls up any. It'd sand them out for you.
Smooth bore.
Yeah, and them boys would race, but they built their engine every week, and I couldn't afford that, so I just ended up racing 2 weeks, and that done me. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed my race time, and Gene Norris was a good boy. He taught me a lot about old racing. Gene used to say, "I don't want to win much. I just enjoy racing."
There's some of the newspaper articles I've seen on Gene. He like ran every race, in a day, and he wouldn't win any. But we've got a picture of him. Probably he doesn't look like he's 18 driving a race car.
We would go to here at Cleveland Speedway, and then we go to Boyd's, and then we go to North Georgia all in one weekend, and worked every day. Well, it was off Sunday, but blowed the old number 7 up at North Georgia, and it run it 8 years when it slung a rod out of it. And the thing won that race that week, but he had dropped back one class and changed the fuel and carburetors because we knew the engine was knocking when we started in the race. Anyway, yeah, I'm enjoying it this morning.
Ed, you got pictures?
And do what?
You have pictures?
Racing pictures?
Yeah, I sell them things $500 a piece.
All right. Well, Deb ordered 2 then.
I wish I did have. I've got 1 or 2 old pictures of some of my old race cars. Would you believe an old 53 Ford?
Now, Mr. Ed, you have been holding out on me.
But couldn't use that. People wouldn't believe that. I done some pretty good racing. Never did win much. I run second through last most of the time.
Second through last.
But I had a ball now, and I'll tell you right quick, the hardest race I run was from Talkeetna to Anchorage, Alaska on a snow machine. 200 miles through the woods. Now, you ain't racing until you done that. That's like driving a dog sled with a motor on it through the boondocks. And the purse was $5,000. It was over 480 machines started, and they was less than 50 finished, and I finished 13th. Is that an unlucky number? Yeah, it was for me because I didn't win the $5,000. Okay, good morning to you.
Bye, Ed.
Out of here. Thank you.
Bye-bye, dear.
I'd bet worry when you wrecked there that there's like wolves and grizzly bears. I mean,
Mr. Ed been holding out on me.
Yeah.
He has not told us he was a racer or anything until that moment.
Mike, going down into Dawsonville and running through all those guys down there, the Charlie Menzies and other guys and
Barrett.
They talk about moonshining racing started because of all their moonshining activities. Now you get up here, people seem to started racing later on, but was in the 50s or when the Cleveland built and the Midway and then Fort Oglethorpe, was it still because of moonshining, or was this guys just wanting to start racing now?
You can attribute it to World War II. All those guys came home, and they had seen so much they wanted to get out and do something. They didn't care what. They wanted to get out and do something. In the wintertime, you played football or you did something else, hunted. In the summertime, you played baseball or you raced. And there were a lot of guys that played baseball, but there were a lot of guys that they were mechanically minded. They became mechanically minded because the Army gave them a job in the motor pool. They learned how to rebuild engines, to fix up Jeeps, so they started fixing up cars and racing them. It was a combination of the moonshine and World War II. People don't believe me when I tell them that. It's racing when you're sitting in a car. When you're sitting in the stands, it doesn't make as much sense to you. But when you're sitting in a car, it's an adrenaline rush like you've never had before. And when you're in a foxhole in Germany and you got everybody shooting at you, it's kind of an adrenaline rush just to stay alive. And racing to them was easy after they'd done that. Mr. Parks told me he spent 5 days in the same foxhole, never got out of it. Because if you raised your head up, there was a sniper. They knew there was a sniper out there because a couple of guys raised their head up and they got shot.
Wow.
So.
But, you know, he was in World War II.
And perhaps they realized that life was too short not to do what you wanted to do.
Or not to do something.
To do something, make a difference.
Yeah.
So when does, the Dawsonville boys claim that dirt track racing started right there in Dawsonville, Georgia. Is it where it got organized, or was it happening all over the country, people out in the back roads just racing each other?
Well, there were probably, hundreds of guys racing up and down the roads in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
But here again, Frank Christian leased Lakewood Speedway for a stock car race. And
that was a horse track, wasn't it?
It was a horse track in 1938. And they had their very first race there in 1938. And most of the drivers, when you look at who all was racing there, most of the guys were moonshine runners.
All out of the North Georgia mountains, right?
All out of the North Georgia mountains. Now, we were talking about, you talked to your friend there on the phone about whether he ever drank the moonshine.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Mincy, I don't know whether you asked him this or not, but Charlie ran moonshine from the time he was 13 till the time he was 16, sometimes 7 times a week. He's never had a drop of liquor in his life.
He said he never owned a car either. He said someone always...
No, he owned the liquor cars, but he never owned a race car.
Yeah, he said he never owned a race car because people come to him
yes,
and asked him to drive for him. That's pretty unique, isn't it?
That's very, very unique. You can't find many drivers that have that kind of career as long as he did. He started in 1949 and walked away in 1983. And you just can't find as many guys that drove those years that did not wind up owning their own race car.
He was pretty successful, wasn't
he? He was very successful.
What did he do outside of racing?
He was a body man.
Body man.
See, that's how he started learning how to drive. When he was 10 years old, he used to work for his daddy. His daddy ran a body shop and I guess you could say automotive repair business in downtown Atlanta. Well, the guys that would come to work and leave their cars with his dad to work on during the day, well, they had to be delivered to those guys when they got through with them. And Charlie Mincy would deliver those cars at 10 years old, go through the streets of Atlanta to certain building, and the guy would be there, and the guy would pay him, and Charlie would walk back to his daddy's garage. That's how Charlie learned how to drive when he was 10 years old.
When you talk to Charlie now, he seems just so mild-mannered and stuff. But I can't imagine behind the wheel. What kind of driver was he? Did you ever get to see him race?
Oh, yeah. He was a very intense driver, but he was probably the cleanest driver you've ever seen. There's been several guys, when we've had these reunions, that'll talk about racing side by side with Charlie for 20 and 30 laps at a time, and they're not worried because they know Charlie is not going to dump them out, not going to spin them out, not going to do anything.
Not going to put a wheel to him.
He's not going to put a wheel to him. He's going to beat you fair and square. He's going to outrun you. He's not going to push you out of the race. Now, you may wind up pushing him out of the race, but you're not going to. And he may wind up coming back at you after that. But he's never going to be the first one to put you out of the race. Mm-hmm. It never was. He didn't really need to. He was that good. When he was driving liquor cars, and Billy Carden, who I wish was still alive because Billy had more stories than Carter had liver pills. But Billy told me that he could take a car and in a 2-lane street with cars parked on both sides of the street and do a 180 in the street and never touch the cars on the sides of the street.
That's just talent.
Just
Great.
talent.
Well, we need to take a break, folks. Well, Deb,
Ooh,
talk to
don't-
them there. Just tell us what's coming up here tomorrow, and this week.
Oh,
while I
next.
get
Well,
things.
I'll tell you what. The polo matches for today have been canceled because of the rain. They have to do that for the safety of the horses and the riders. But they're going to try to have the 2:00 free matches tomorrow at Bendabout. And the automobile show opens up at 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. over here at Westwood Campus over on Highway 60. Go by and see them. That is a free activity. And we'll be back with you in just a few moments.
WOOP LP, Cleveland, Tennessee.
Check into cash. To get the most money, turn your car into cash at Check Into Cash. You don't need a check to get a payday advance at Check Into Cash. Apply online or stop on by at Check Into Cash. Get a payday advance or a title loan. When you need cash fast, visit Check Into Cash. Visit checkintocash.com or call 877-262-CASH for more information.
Get on down. Check into cash.
Wheeler Technologies has moved. Visit them at their new location at 490 Grove Avenue Southwest next to Bradley Rentals. Same great folks, same great service with a better location to serve you. Call Wheeler Technologies for voice, data, and security needs at 664-TECH. That's 664-8324. And remember, depend on Wheeler Technologies for the current time and temperature every day at 476-1111. Tennessee Alarm Contractor C1750.
You save when you buy from the factory. Now you can save even more while we celebrate the grand opening of our new store on the North Shore in Chattanooga. Plus, we'll pay your sales tax on Mermaid products $6.99 or more.
Kiesler Incorporated is in the business of recycling your metal, and they pay cash. The only covered scrapyard around where you can recycle rain or shine. They're located off the bypass on Overhead Bridge Road. Automobiles, appliances, copper, stainless steel, tin, all metals can be recycled at Kiesler, and you can walk away with cash. That's right, they pay cash, and they are the friendliest scrapyard in the Southeast. If you have unwanted metal just laying around, bring it to Kiesler Recycling today and walk away with cash. Kiesler Recycling open Monday through Saturday, 7:30 to 5, or call for more details, 614-3000.
I'm Caleb Day. Here's a look at your weather forecast. Cloudy skies today with a 70% chance of showers, high in the mid-70s, low overnight in the mid-50s, and partly sunny Sunday with highs in the upper 70s. That's a look at your weather forecast on Whoop FM, brought to you by P-Dabs Antiques.
Okay, we're back.
Welcome back to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. We have Mike Bell, not Senator Mike Bell. We have an intelligent Mike Bell with us today.
I still want your votes.
Yes, he still wants your votes. And he's here. He is a historian about dirt track racing and just unbelievable stories. And before I go on, our friends, the Party Band, the Convertibles, the Party Band will be at B&B Marina tonight from, this is Saturday, September 21st. And they'll start about 9 o'clock. You can get there early and drink earlier if you want to, or you can just eat or something. But if you, but that'll be the Party Band. And I imagine this is indoors or at that pavilion, so you can go and get wet in the river, or you can go to up to the docks area. So,
but they have it rain or shine, I believe.
Rain or shine.
Next week on our show, Ron, we're going to have P-Dab and P-Dab's aunt, and they're going to be talking about.
Well, that's a good one. P-Dab and P-Dab's aunt.
Growing up over in the Prospect area and out on Harrison Pike. And
growing up before cell phones and GPSs and color TV and indoor plumbing and
when you grew all your own stuff and you were glad to have it.
Yeah.
And so that should be a fun time. I know that all of our listeners like those kinds of shows. And then on the first weekend in October, we have our friend Kent Inslee coming in. He's going to talk about Sugar Creek and Union Grove and Valley View and all those communities and Buck's Pocket. And then on the 12th of October, we're going to have our buddies from Couch's Barbecue come in.
Ken and Kenny Steiner.
Talk about how barbecue got started down there. And by the way, I've invited the mayor. So we know some lies will be told that day if the mayor shows up.
I think in November, there's a couple of people we got coming and haven't got the dates on them, but Dr. Hood from UT will be here to talk about Appalachian religions. And he is quite an expert on the snake handling part, too. We did a snake handling show a couple of weeks ago, but Dr. Hood has written several books about it. And then Mr. Murray, he is the president of the Chattanooga Historical Society. He's going to come in and talk about underground Chattanooga. Chattanooga used to be a lot lower than it used to, and they just filled in the streets. So there's underground parts of those buildings. The first stories now it used to be the second stories in Chattanooga. So pretty interesting story about the history of Chattanooga, and we'll be talking about that sometime in November.
We're booked all the way into November. We got lots of other good stuff coming up, too.
So if you want to come talk on the show.
And we'd like to thank Mike for coming all the way up
yes.
from near Atlanta. Where do you live, buddy?
I live in Decatur. I live 9 miles out of Atlanta in Decatur.
And he suffered you can't tell Debbie no because she just keeps asking.
The one thing I would like to find out,
yes,
I did some research from 1913, and they built what was called a board track in Atlanta and raced motorcycles on it. It was a quarter-mile, 45-degree banked motorcycle track. Well, a guy named Jack Prince did this. Jack went all over the country doing this. He built one also here in Chattanooga. I found the articles in late 1913. It was out on Rossville Avenue. If anybody has any idea of exactly where that was, I would love to know.
I will send Mr. Murray. He's an attorney in Chattanooga. He's one of the leading historians down in that area. I'll send him that question here Monday on email. And
please do.
Okay. Jim Ogden, too, Chickamauga Battlefield. He studied the roadways down there a lot. He might have some idea. I imagine that's Rossville Boulevard, don't you, Ron?
Well, I would think it'd be Rossville.
It's a Rossville Avenue, but it dead ends at a big set of railroad tracks. But when you go on the other side of the railroad tracks, it is Rossville Boulevard.
Oh.
And I'm wondering if it wasn't further out, because Rossville Avenue dead ends at a warehouse and then comes right by a fire station. Because I drove it, and they're building houses back in there now. It's kind of like a rebuild area south. I think they call it the south side or whatever it is, kind of a historic area. But I would love to find out and find some pictures there, because it was. And by the way, there's also, everybody knows about Lake Winnipesaukee. Okay, I was told 2 stories, racing stories about Lake Winnipesaukee. The man that built Lake Winnipesaukee supposedly.
It's Pasoka.
Is it Soka?
Lake Winnipesaukee. You got
if you're from this area.
It's Lake Winnipesaukee.
Okay.
Lake Winnie is what we are. Lake Winnie.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. The man that built it in the 30s actually used money he won racing to build that racetrack. I mean that amusement park. And then
Terry, tell us about it. You know about that.
I just seen a picture of it. That's all I know.
In 1949. They built a quarter-mile track on the back side of the speedway. An old gentleman that's now dead, Bob O'Quinn, who helped Honest Charlie in the very beginning. He built that car, that famous car that Charlie had with all the louvers in it. He built that car for Charlie. Anyway, Bob told me the racetrack was behind the park. You go just past the park, and there's a road. It's kind of a maintenance road that goes back in there. And there's a flat area back in there that I guarantee you that's where the racetrack was. I'd love to find some
Terry,
pictures.
tell me where you've seen the picture of. Where do you think it was?
It's at the end of the lake. That little train that goes around the park.
Right.
When you go around the far end of the lake, that place is over there on the left. It's flat, and you can tell that's where it was at. And they have one picture in the little museum.
And what year was that?
49.
Okay, now
at Lake Winnie they have a picture.
Yeah.
Well, I sent a text message to our friend Buddy that his family owns Lake Winnie, and he's not real good about answering me, but he'll eventually will.
Right.
But if there's a picture there, I think that we
Yeah,
can get
the
permission for it.
Buddy and his family, they're from 1925 forward and still run it today. So if there was a racetrack there, they're definitely going to know it.
Well, see, I was told, Bob O'Quinn told me that the people that run it today were the same people. They're relatives of the same people that opened the place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think he said it opened in the 30s. I'm not sure, but he said it opened with money the guy won in the 20s and early 30s from racing.
I think 1925 may have been when they built it was a lake and swimming pool area first before it was a amusement park. And then they started adding rides as they went along. But a long time, we had a huge swimming pool down there.
Well, you know, Lakewood was the same thing.
Yeah.
Lakewood was a reservoir for the city of Atlanta before they made it a fairgrounds.
Now, Lakewood, we Raymond Parks, that's his first name, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
His middle name was Dawson.
Right.
He was born in Dawson County, and he was related to the Dawsons that the Dawson County is named after.
My understanding is that, and see if I got my story right, because you hear all these stories, but Mr. Parks, and what was the gentleman you said went to Lakewood and rented the track?
Frank Christian.
And then some people named France all got together, and basically this is how NASCAR begun. It was these people like Parks and Christensen and Mr. France, right? Is that a true story?
To start with, back before World War I, Bill France ran a gas station in Daytona Beach. He had moved to Daytona Beach from Washington, D.C. He used to work with a gentleman named Red Vogt in a Cadillac dealership in Washington, D.C. Red had gone to Indianapolis. He wanted to race, so he goes to Indianapolis. He winds up in Atlanta working for Mr. Parks. Well, Bill goes to Florida. Well, they had races on the beach.
Hold that thought right there. Good morning, you're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yeah, I just turned Gerald. I don't know if he was talking about the Cleveland Speedway.
We're talking about dirt track racing anywhere.
Well, did you know that Joe Lee Johnson won the inaugural race at the Charlotte Motorsport Speedway?
Yes, he did. In a convertible.
He was driving for Paul McDuffie.
Was he?
Yes, sir. Mr. McDuffie was a gentleman that was killed that same year, Labor Day, at Darlington in a very unusual, horrific wreck that killed him and a guy named Charles Swetland and a NASCAR official named Joe Taylor.
Wow.
Yeah. But going back to the hard track race, I didn't like the way they let Carl Edwards win that race the way before last, because the way it is, if you're the lead car when the caution comes out, you have to be the first one to go across the line.
Well, they've got a lot of mess going on right now, don't they?
Yeah.
They were rewriting the rule book as he was crossing the finish line.
Yeah, they sure did. They changed it because, see, what Jimmy Johnson did at that time, they black flagged him and made him go back to the back of the lead.
One of the old dirt track racers over in Dawsonville was telling me that there was several rule books. The rule book from yesterday and the rule book from today. And tomorrow's rule book may be different. You just have to go with the flow.
I wish they'd let it keep going the way it did. If you notice, when they started changing all these rules, Jeff Gordon quit winning races.
Yeah.
Well, you can thank Smokey Unit for the rule book the size it is. I've got a copy of the NASCAR 1948 rules, and it's one sheet, legal sheet, back and front, and that was all the rules there were for racing. It was modified racing. It wasn't the Grand National racing, but it was one sheet. But Smokey Unick made Bill France stand up and think, and he changed so many things in racing.
Mm-hmm.
Now they weigh screws, don't they? I mean, it gets down to the point.
They weigh everything, yeah.
Yeah, a screw could be out of, somebody was fined this year because his screws were were loose. That may be what it was.
Well, in years ago, Sam McQuaig told me this. He was a driver in the middle 60s. He won the Firecracker 400 at Daytona. He told me they used to take a wooden block. He says, I can't believe the cars they drive today. They'd take a wooden block and they'd run it under your car, just drag it under your car. And if it ever got stopped, You had to go back to the garage and raise the car up enough so that wooden block would go anywhere under your car. And it was supposedly a 4-inch high wooden block. Nowadays, they ride, and you can't hardly put your hand underneath the body and the ground. I don't know how they get the jacks under the sides when they jack them up to change the tires.
So low to the ground.
They're so low to the ground. But then those, and the tires that Sam would tell me, the tires in those days, there was hard and harder, and that was all you had. They were rock hard or they were rock harder. You didn't have any soft tires.
They got tires now for every track.
Oh, they got tires for every lap of the track. They change tires for late in the race. Save those tires for late in the race.
Well, they can qualify on all totally different types. They can put them on backward and everything else, and I think when they qualify.
Yeah, but I went to a race. If we're going to talk about modern day, I went to a race at what used to be called Jeffco Speedway. It's now called Gresham Motorsports Park. And what they did is after you qualified, you all parked out front just behind the wall there in front of the grandstands. And nobody worked on the cars until it got time to crank them up and line them up on the racetrack and go. You couldn't change tires. You couldn't change anything.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, caller. Thanks for calling in, buddy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, bye-bye. Where
Wait a
were
minute, we were racing on the sand, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Parks.
Mr. Parks, anyway.
This is hard to do, shift gears.
Yeah, I know. But they had the I guess it was the Chamber of Commerce tried to put on a race in Daytona. So in the 20s, they used to have the Flying Mile at Daytona, and a guy named Lockhart got killed, and they kind of killed the ambiance of watching somebody getting killed while you're on vacation, you know. So, but in the 30s, the Chamber of Commerce said, why don't we put on a race? And they put on a race. It was not successful at all, and they weren't going to do it again until Bill France stepped in and said, hey, listen, let me do this race. I'll get these guys to come down, and we won't have these local yokels racing around here. We'll have real professional race drivers. And he got a bunch of guys to come down, and this is 39 or 40, something like that, and they raced on the beach. And they kept doing that and kept doing that. But he organized then. He had a circuit in 46. The guy named Ed Samples from Atlanta was the champion. It was a national championship circuit or something like that. And he was a national champion. But NASCAR, Bill called all these people together, promoters, drivers, everybody, down to Daytona to that something stream hotel, whatever it is, and got them together to form NASCAR. And he got guys to pony up money and got it all together. Mr. Parks was there, but he didn't pony up the money at that time. But Mr. Parks and Mr. Christian both helped Bill with money for the purses and things like that when he was in the beginning. And then on Monday, Mr. Bill would ride back through Atlanta, and he would pay Mr. Parks and Mr. Frank Christian back.
It's amazing.
So why did Dawsonville have so many national champions come out of that little community down there?
Because they had the most moonshiners come out of there.
Yeah, the way we were, but
believe it or not, and Gordon probably told you this story too. There was one driver named Bernard Long, I think it was. And Bernard wasn't in the moonshine business. Well, he won the race at Daytona, won $400. And when he got back to Dawsonville, guess what he did? He went into moonshine business.
And there he goes, got him set up, huh? Can you tell the story that David Sosby talks about his dad getting refueled during the race? Do you know that story?
With Jack Smith?
Yes.
I don't know it as well as David does.
Well, of course, but
and that was when Bill France wrote another page in the rule book because there was nothing in the rule books about you couldn't have two guys in the car at a time. And Jack Smith was in the car fueling the thing up as Gopher was racing around the racetrack. They had these, and you could buy them for a dime a dozen, these gasoline cans that the Army used during World War II with these screw-on caps. And you could screw off the cap and turn it upside down, and there was the spout, and you'd screw it back on, and then you'd pour it into the gas tank. Jack was, as they were going around the racetrack, Jack's doing this, putting the gas in. Well, after the race, they want to disqualify Gober, and Gober says, "Why?" He said, "Well, you had two guys in the car," and he says, "There's no rule against that." I mean, it's in the old days, in all honesty, they used the entire front seat of a 40 Ford. I mean, the whole seat was there. 2 people, 3 people could have ridden around in the car.
Can you imagine the Rough Ride being loose in the back of that car with that gas can?
And the story starts out is that they're going to run out of gas, and and of course timing on the pit stop. So instead of stopping and fueling, they just dove in the car, and they had some kind of wrench that he had bent.
Yeah,
and
special
had
little wrench.
And
they had a special little everything in those
anyway,
days.
it was able to pop the gas cap off
Yeah.
real good. And because the gas can was still inside, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't an outside spout, and so.
So they tried to disqualify him, and it's a great story. And we do have David telling that story on film. And if you'd like to see that original car, it has been refurbished, and it's beautiful, and it's at the Georgia Racing Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Number 5.
Gober did it himself. Him and David built the car again. The car that Mr. Day has in South Carolina is another number 50 that Gober raced, set in the woods for quite a few years. And the guy that rebuilt the car had to rebuild about every body panel on it because it had rusted to pieces. They had to get a new frame because the frame sat on the ground. And they've got one other car, and I wish they would bring it into the Hall of Fame. It's a 34 Ford. They ran it to Peach Bowl in the mid-50s.
Peach Bowl
Speedway.
dirt?
No, it was asphalt. It was dirt in 49 and part of 50. And in September of 50, they asphalted.
On film, we have an old fella down at Boyd's overalls guy. And I was asking him about racing. He said, pavement's how you get there. Dirt's what you race on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, the Sosby, Gober Sosby, and of course, pretty legendary down in the North Georgia. Maybe not as much up here, but they say that he's not in the Hall of Fame. You know why?
Who, Gober Sosby?
Yeah.
Well, he's not in the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Yes.
NASCAR.
And they said there may be some differences between them and the France family.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, over the ruling about the gas can.
Well, that's like Frank Mundy. You ever heard of Frank Mundy?
Yes.
Okay. What about Mr. Teague?
No.
Mr. Teague was a personal friend of Bill France. He was the first fatality at Daytona International Speedway trying out a Indianapolis car on the racetrack and got killed, the Sumar Special. And Fireball Roberts was a personal friend of Bill Francis. He had been around Daytona forever. And so was Smokey Yunick. So was Ray Fox. They were personal friends. But on Sunday, it was a completely different story. He was the boss.
Mm-hmm.
He was the dictator. He ran the racetrack, and y'all had to work for him.
Is it still that way today?
Not as much as it used to be. Money talks.
Yeah.
It didn't in those days, because Bill knew good and well he was living a lot better life than he had been when he got to Florida to begin with. But most of the time nowadays, these guys that are racing, I don't see the incentive for running first when you're making $6 million a year, whether you're in the race car in 43rd place or in first place. Where's the incentive? Because that's what the guys drove for. Charlie Mincy will tell you real quick. One of the things he'd tell you, he says, God, we'd have probably run for nothing in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, essentially, those guys are running for nothing now because they got these contracts that guarantee them, I don't know, $2-3 million a year. And they did it because they worked hard all these years being good race drivers. But now, what's the incentive to win? That's why you have a lot of them. That's why I couldn't understand Dale Earnhardt. I mean, if they'd been running for banana peelings, Dale Earnhardt would want to be first. But you got a lot of guys, we're running for banana peels? I don't want those. I ain't going to run first. I'll just get out here and ride.
They'll want to get there first before they ride.
Yeah. But he was an amazing race driver in that if it was $2 or $2 million, Dale Earnhardt was going to be first. He was not going to be second. He didn't care anything. David Pearson has a favorite saying, second place is first loser.
Yeah, that's right. Mike, tell us the story about the two fellas that almost raced at Cleveland.
You talking about Kermit McGee and Jabez Jones?
Yes.
You'd have to understand now, and I hate to tell this on both of those guys, they drank a little bit. And one of their things was, as they were driving to the racetrack, they drank a little bit. But they're towing their car, they're coming from Toccoa up through the mountains to Cleveland Speedway. And they had a panel truck, had a 409 Chevrolet, and it ran pretty good. And they're going down the road, and this Buick sedan pulls almost out in front of them and runs them practically off the road and takes off down the road. And I never did get whether it was Kermit driving or Jabez driving, but they said, we got to teach this guy a lesson. So they took off after him. They're towing the car behind them on a trailer now, and they're doing God knows what down the highway trying to catch up with this Buick. They're going to run him off the road because, by God, he ran them off the road. They catch up with him.
That's right, isn't it?
They catch up with him, and they do just exactly that. They run him off the right side of the road. They get on going on up the road to Cleveland Speedway. And they get to ride down the road, and Jabez said, what was that, a bumblebee? What was that? It was bullets. The Buick was behind them, and some guy was leaning out the window shooting at them with a gun. And so they romped down on it to take on off. They said, oh, my God, we got to get out of here. And they took on off the Buick, kept right up with him, kept shooting at him, kept shooting. Finally, they got away from the Buick a little bit, and there used to be some kind of drive-in right out here near.
We think it was the Sugar and Spice.
Okay. The traffic was starting to back up, and the only thing that they could think to do was to go around the parking lot, you know. And the Buick finally stopped them, and the guy stuck a gun in his face, and he showed him his badge and told him he was the police chief, sheriff or whatever. Well, he carried him to jail. And the story would end there, except they didn't have a penny to their name to pay the fines. God knows what kind of fine they were going to get. They had to leave their race car at the sheriff's station, go back to Toccoa and get the cash and come back up and bond their car out so they could go back home with a race car. Never raced that night at all.
Probably never raced at Cleveland ever again.
Do you remember what year that was?
Was probably 62 or 63.
Well, if us locals will remember who that sheriff is.
If it was the sheriff, it could be the chief of police.
I don't know who.
We'll have to investigate.
If it was the sheriff, his last name may have been Cannon.
Yeah, yeah. Very well known fellow.
Well, it was far enough out of town that it probably was the sheriff. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't think the police chief from Cleveland would be that far out of town because they said they went quite a ways.
According to where the bootleggers are.
Yeah, I guess. I guess.
That's a great story. And
when Kermit tells that story, you get to laughing so much because he told us. We were sitting in C.L. Pritchett's tire store, and there were like 4 or 5 guys around me, and I kept getting scared because I was trying to tape this. And everybody's laughing so hard that you don't know whether all the laughing's getting on the tape too, you know. But it didn't, thank goodness. The way the camera was pointed, that was where the microphone.
We're going to try to catch up with them and get that story on for our documentary.
Kermit runs a flea market there just south of Livonia. He's at that flea market every weekend. He doesn't sell anything except spots for tables. That's all he sells.
Oh.
He doesn't sell any kind of knickknacks or anything like that. He owns a property, and he sells you a spot to put your table.
How far is that from here?
Oh, God. Probably from here, and the big problem is you have to go through the mountains to get there. It'd probably take you 2 hours, maybe 3.
Yeah.
See, Dawsonville, that's the problem with getting to Dawsonville from here. It's up.
Oh, there's no direct
up and
route.
curvy, no matter which way you
direct
go.
route.
And you got to go there and have a bully burger.
Oh, yes, sir.
Bully burger at the pool room if you ever go to Dawsonville.
But we found that we had a Big D's barbecue too. That was pretty good place.
Yeah.
Now, we talk about moonshine running. You know the what in the pits in the pits in any of these dirt tracks. Was there any drinking going on in the pits?
Well, that was one of the first things that got everybody mad at Bill France. No alcohol allowed in the pits. That was one of his rules. Now, it wasn't enforced real well because all these guys were running moonshine, so it wasn't like it was a beer or two. I mean, it was a quart jar of moonshine floating around. And if you drink half a quart jar of moonshine, you'll have trouble.
Yeah, well,
But
yeah,
yeah, there's been many a time I've had to help guys get in the car
to drive in a race.
Well,
Yeah.
what about
now? Someone told us, and I'm sorry, I can't remember which driver it was. It may have been Doc German who said, when you were behind that wheel and you were driving that car, you did not need to be impaired in any way.
Well, that goes
But then
back.
some people might
But some
think that
people
they-
only got behind the wheel when they got impaired because they couldn't do it without it.
Well, it goes back to the old story of Buddy Schumann. Believe it or not, Sports Illustrated actually wrote an article, sent somebody down to Charlotte to talk to the race drivers about driving. He was a stick and ball sport, had no idea what the guy was talking about as far as car racing was concerned. And the famous quote that he put in the article in Sports Illustrated was, Buddy Schumann told him, he says, I drive it down the straightaway and Lord Calvert drives it through the turns.
Yeah, there you go.
Lord Calvert being his favorite drink.
Yes. Yes.
Well, now in the little dirt tracks, Terry, did they drink down here at Cleveland?
Oh,
I
God.
think they did a little bit.
Are you kidding?
Terry, did you drink a little bit down
No,
here? Oh,
no.
okay. See, no one admits it here. Good morning, you're live on Old Town Cleveland.
How you doing, Ron?
I'm doing fine, Brett. How are you?
Good.
So, did you like that football game last night?
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, the Bears made a believer out of the Walker Valley Mustangs, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Well, so did anybody get hurt?
I didn't see it.
Well, that's good that you never want anybody to get hurt on either team there, and
I think we did have a cheerleader hurt last night for Walker Valley.
yes,
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, Ron,
yes,
the next home game, Ron,
yes.
is not till the 27th.
The 27th. Okay, how come?
Next Friday.
That's next Friday. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Bill Price. It's Bill Price coming in.
Yeah. Signal Mountain will be coming in. The former Bradley coach Bill Price will be here. Bill Price has changed a little bit. He's got a little heavier. He's got a little older and a little heavier.
He still looks like
Of course,
Popeye.
I still got a little older and heavy, or too. So,
Yeah.
so how you going to be there?
Yeah.
Well, I'll see you there. You know I'll be there.
Yeah. All right.
And we enjoyed you calling in on the TV show last night.
Hey, you need to come by the Sports Drive afternoon show on Friday.
I'll try to do that.
Friday afternoon.
I'll try to do that.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Brett.
Ron's just put up a picture of one of those iconic race cars, one of the old Chevys. And I believe that's one of Dave Wright's cars. Is that right?
It's a 55 Chevrolet.
Hey,
Or does that
that's
say Dave Watson on it?
That's Boyd.
Terry was telling me.
Dave
it's
Wright. Go ahead, Terry. Tell us about this. It says 1A on it.
Yeah, that is Dave Wright's car, and that was at Boyd Speedway.
Yeah, it looks
probably
like Boyd.
64, 5, somewhere in that time. And then Wildman Jerry Smith started driving for Dave Wright and drove several.
Wildman Jerry Smith. That just got to be a story there.
Well, David Wright Sr. drove, and David Wright Jr. drove. And David Wright Jr. is going to be on our documentary. He's living down here in Tunnel Hill, Georgia, and called me and told me to come see him or let him know when he can come here. And it's been pulled by just a regular pickup truck, you think? Or is that a wrecker of some kind?
I guarantee you those guys down at the car show would like to have either one of those cars.
Oh, boy,
That
wouldn't they?
truck, that's what, a 48, 47? Yeah. Pickup truck. That's 47,
Looks like it's got
48,
some
40.
kind of wrecker thing on the back of
Yeah.
it. And that's a great picture, and that's Boyd's.
Well, I'm gonna ask.
And
both-
it's asphalt, so we know the picture's at least back to the asphalt times.
I ask both of you a question here. Over the years, the greatest dirt track racer, who is it?
Greatest dirt track racer?
Yeah.
Yeah, or some of
Or
them.
the one you think, the one that beat you.
The one that was my hero until I found out who he actually was, the louse he was, is Leroy Yarbrough.
Mhm.
Leroy Yarbrough could get in a kiddie car and outrun anybody.
Mhm.
Where did he
was at
run?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Hmm. And so why do you call him a louse?
His lifestyle.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Terry, what about you with the guys you run against? Who?
Oh, the ones we run against?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, of course, Skip Arp from Georgetown here, he was one of the better drivers around. Of course, Dale McDowell from down in Chickamauga. he went on to, well, he's still running, and he has made a pretty good living at it, you know. But I was a Wild Man Jerry Smith fan from the first time I ever seen him race.
Where was he from?
East Ridge.
East Ridge.
Yeah, yeah, and they were running the Flathead Fords back then. Then they went to the V8 Chevrolet Pontiac motors, you know, around 55 or 56. But
What years were you running, Terry?
my first car, I had it in '67.
Okay.
57 Chevrolet.
Okay, let me ask you guys a question. One thing that some of the older racers told me is that they were driving Fords back when the 55 Chevys were running, and the race promoters would pay them to bring their car and run. Talk to me about that a little bit. They'd be the only Ford in the race.
Oh, that was done up until the 70s.
What was the mentality there?
Trying to show everybody both kinds of cars.
Mm-hmm.
But see, until the mid-'60s, they raced cars from the 30s around here. Mm-hmm. And then about the time that car right there started racing, that's Dave Wright's uncle. Bob his uncle? His uncle built a 58 Ford about that same time that Donnie Allison drove. Now, the thing was that everybody recognized the 58 Ford and they recognized the 57 Chevrolet. And there were people in the grandstands, because this is how Bill France built his kingdom, I guess you could say, was on the idea that you rooted for the car on the racetrack. You didn't even know who the driver was, but it was a 58 Ford out there, and you were a Ford man. You liked Fords. So you rooted for that guy that was driving the 58 Ford. But if you were a Chevrolet man, you rooted for that guy that was driving 57 Chevrolet, because you could sit in the grandstands and tell what kind of car that was that went by. Mm-hmm. But it was so much cheaper to run the Chevrolet. And I don't know whether Chevrolet did this on purpose or not, but they literally flooded the market with Chevrolet parts, so that anybody in the world could afford a Chevrolet engine in their race car. Mm-hmm. And that's the most expensive part of racing, is the engine. And that's what's created crate late model racing nowadays. But the Fords, like I say, with the 292, that bottom end, until they started building the different engines, you couldn't hardly put high compression pistons in those things.
One of the old racers told me that they would pay, when they'd go all the way up in Upper East Tennessee to race, when his wife bought her $1 ticket, they'd give her $50 change back, no matter what monies she passed over, just as an incentive for them to show back up. And that was the kind of thing that happened, because it filled the stands, because people were so passionate about Fords and Chevys.
Oh, yeah. My uncle would, my great uncle would not drive anything except a Chevrolet. He thought that was the only car made. So, hey, go ahead, caller. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, Ron.
Hey.
This is Neil.
Hey, Neil.
It's going to get technical now.
I was so looking forward to this show, and of course I'm at the AACA National Show out at Westwood in the rain. But of course I haven't got to listen to the show. I'll catch it on the archive. But that's not like listening to it live. But I look so forward to this show. Sorry that I missed it live, but I'll catch it on the archive. I'm sure it's a wealth of information.
Oh, it's been great.
Neil, how's the show going?
Well, it's wet.
Is it still raining hard? We're inside. We can't see.
It's just steady rain. It has rained harder than what it is now. But, it's 255 cars from 27 different states, but it's raining.
Well, we're going to head out there in a little bit, so
okay.
I'll have my duck fins on. Neil, do you have a question for Mike?
No, not really. I've not got to listen as far as to have anything to ask about. Just the fact that I grew up watching the old Ken Bauer, the old flathead coops and all that, and really loved the super modified era with Friars and Toodle Estes and T.C. Hunt and all those fellas. I remember watching them and still like racing. I just don't go as often as I used to. But
okay. All righty, Mr. Neil. Thank you, buddy.
All right.
Bye-bye. So apparently the car show's still going on. It's worth it in the rain. Even
Toodle Estes. There's the name.
What's up with Toodles? Now, I keep seeing cars that say Toodles Estes on the car, but they tell me that the driver's somebody different. Did that happen a lot, or did Toodle drive his own cars?
Toodle was another one that hardly ever owned a race car. He never had any money to own a race car. Toodle had a lot of vices, as his ex-wife will tell you. But in all honesty, when you looked at Toodle Estes, you saw the arms on the Harold Fryer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Toodle is, about 4 inches shorter than I am. And he had arms that were just so big. His son Rocky told me that Toodle was a golf shark. He'd get out on the golf course and start playing with guys. But his thing wasn't this low score. It was closest to the hole because he had these arms. He'd hit that ball forever, and same thing with pool shooting. Rocky said he was a pool shark too. He could stay in a pool hall all day and never pay for a pool game or a drink or a beer. Somebody be there to buy it, or he'd play somebody for a beer and they'd lose because he wasn't going to win. Nobody was going to win but him. That was one of the mentalities he had, and what made him such a great race driver is once he got in a car, he didn't care who'd driven it before. He knew who'd driven it before, or it was a brand new race car. He was going to win with the car.
So when I see his name on a car, he's likely the driver then?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Until 1982 when he died.
Okay. Was he killed in a wreck, or did he just die?
No, ma'am. He had won a feature race. I think it was a volunteer. I'm not sure. And it was the first race he'd won in several years. Rocky was there. Rocky told me about it. But they're partying in the parking lot, and they were about to go to eat steaks. He was going to use that money he'd won to buy everybody a steak, and he had a heart attack. And I got told years later why that happened. But his best friend, the ambulance had already left the track, They had ambulances at the track, but it was so late after the race, everybody had left, So they called the emergency people and got them to turn the ambulance around, and a guy named Paul Ghost that used to drive in the 50s. His car has been restored. You ought to see it. Anyway, he put Toodle in the back seat of his car and was racing down the expressway trying to meet the EMTs so they could carry him but he died anyway. But I was told there was a guy that lived in South Carolina named Jim Bradshaw. Bradshaw was a money racer, and that's what he loved about Toodle, because Toodle didn't care a thing about. Toodle actually sold the trophies that he used to win back to the promoters. When I met Rocky, we went over to Rocky's house, and Rocky had 4 trophies his daddy had won, and 2 of them were golf. But he didn't have any racing trophies at all because Toodle didn't want the trophies. He wanted the money. He was a money racer. And Bradshaw was too. And Bradshaw said there was a real nice pharmacist there in Anderson, South Carolina, that would give them these pills, and they could stay up 24 hours a day if they wanted to. But they didn't know what it was doing to their heart. And Bradshaw lived on a lake there, Lake Hartwell there in Anderson on the South Carolina side. And he showed me he had a big old scar from right here, from right below his throat all the way down to his navel and then across. He had had open heart surgery, and the doctor told him, he says, I can't do that again. And he asked the doctor why, and he said, your heart is like jelly because you took all those pills in the 60s. I can't help you. He said, you'll die of a heart attack soon. And that's what killed Toodle, too, because Toodle did all the pills, too. So they could stay up all night, have fun, and go race the next day.
Wow.
But he was a great race car.
What are some of the I know that we had a fatality opening day at Cleveland Speedway in the early 60s. Who was that?
1963 was J.C. Hendricks. He's on my list because he is from Griffin, Georgia. But in all honesty, that fatality was not caused at the racetrack. J.C. Hendricks, the year before, in 62, was working for the Chevrolet assembly plant just south of Lakewood. It was called the Lakewood Assembly Plant. And they were remodeling the plant, and he got hit in the head with one of the beams from the building they were moving around. He had surgery, and they put a plate in his head Well, his doctor told him he could go back to work. It wouldn't be that strenuous to him. But he did tell the doctor that he raced, and the doctor told him in no uncertain terms that he couldn't race. There wasn't any way he could race. And what happened, what I surmise happened, was that the plate came loose that night and hemorrhaged. And he literally bled out in the car before they could do anything, because when he came down the front straightaway, before he hit the number one turn, he was already dead. And he hit the wall, and the car has been up a little bit. You can see the picture in the paper, because I've been over here to the
History branch and looked at the picture that was in the paper. I'd love to have that picture. In the article, they couldn't figure out why he died, because he did not hit the wall that hard. So he had some medical issues.
He had medical issues.
Okay.
So it would have been the force of the driving that probably loosened the plate.
And that's what the doctor told him, and that's the reason why the doctor didn't want him to race. The plate set in his head, but yeah, when you're in a race car, and Terry probably tell you, you don't think about it when you're racing because you're concentrating so much on racing, but you're getting shook up really bad.
We looked at some of the cars over in Dawsonville there at the Racing Hall of Fame, and you get to get really up close and look, and we were amazed at the seats have absolutely no padding.
Oh, yeah.
And something that kind of resembles a lap belt in them, and then that was just not safe. And the gas tank behind you.
Oh, they were death traps.
They were death traps.
Well, you know go ahead, David.
I'm sorry. Up on the screen, we have obviously a picture, I believe, from the Cleveland Speedway. It has a wide variety of 50s Chevrolets, and we have a number 26 car with two guys standing out front. It says Estes on the back. I have no idea who those guys are. Terry, anyway there you recognize, Mike?
Well, that's probably Estes Trucking.
Yes.
Out of Richmond, South Carolina. These guys may have worked, because that's the color that Estes Trucking uses on their trucks. And the 26 is painted in the number that they letter their trucks with when you see them going down the highway. That's the way that Estes is written. It's either Estes Trucking, or there used to be in Atlanta, and I don't know whether they're up here, there used to be a HVAC outfit that was named Estes.
I don't remember that, but it had to me.
We were just, I found these pictures, and we have no idea who the people are in them, and I have, well, there were probably 5 or 6 pictures. We know it's Cleveland Speedway, and one of them was Gene Norris, that very young picture of him. Ron had the picture up a few minutes ago, but this is very much how, the racetrack looked.
Yeah, there. Jack Cunningham, which was a very popular driver here in this area.
Have you heard of Jack?
Yes,
Yeah.
Jack, and just a super guy that I've known him growing up, and I remember as he got older, he couldn't see quite as well, and you'd walk up and say, "Hey, Jack," and he'd say, "Who is this?" And I'd tell him, and the next thing he's got his arms wrapped around you. He was so happy.
Nice
to always
gentleman.
say. But now he had one of the old 30 models, and with the rag top, and he let it sit out all winter. And the seat belt in the top had rotted, and he hit the wall, and it ejected him through the air out onto the track. They said he went 20 feet in the air. It could have been, may have been less, may have been more, but he landed on the track. Doc German was behind him, and Doc hit something and thought he had ran over Jack. But Jack was in the hospital for a long time. But talking about safety features, you had a rag top, and I guess they did wear a helmet, but there's no face or anything there. And Doc German talks about going around, and as you come around there, your jaws get full of air, and they're sort of plopping in the breeze, and he said he liked that. So, of course,
That's why a lot of guys wore masks like an outlaw.
Yeah. Doc said he finally got where he wore the bandana to keep the dust out of his.
What about the mud coming in there? I mean, it looked like you'd want to goggles. There's mud. If you ever go to a dirt track race and go to look at a car afterwards, there's mud inside the other guy's car. And if you stand down in curve 1 taking videos like we did down at Boyd, there's mud on you too, because mud and red dirt grid, and we were getting hit with the mud thing. But how do you keep from, if you didn't have goggles and stuff, how do you keep from getting hit in the face?
You just raced.
You didn't. Well, he's still alive. A guy named Willie Carter. I was born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, and Willie Carter was one of the guys I used to watch race. And Willie's kind of blind right now and he attributes it to a night at Baxley, Georgia, where his goggles, because they only wore goggles that covered the eyes at that time. A rock came off the racetrack and crashed into his goggles and just splattered it up. He couldn't see through it, so he pulled the goggles down and continued to race. Well, all that dirt got in his eyes, and there was so much calcium in the dirt. They used to put that in the dirt to keep the dust down. All that calcium and dust got in his eyes. He said for about a week after that, he was having trouble seeing anything. But it wasn't because the rock had hit the goggles. It was because of all the dust that got in his eyes. That was the reason everybody started wearing goggles.
Terry, did you wear goggles?
Yeah, it was a face shield, like a motorcycle helmet, you know.
Did the mud hit all over your face?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had a piece of chicken wire in the front of the windshield there.
A lot of guys used to tie rags to their wrists so they could wipe their face shield and keep driving, you know. You'd see a guy, he'd tie a rag around his wrist, one or the other, either left or right, whichever way they do it, and they'd wipe their goggles with that.
Okay,
that's
now,
the reason they have tear-offs now.
I want to people who've never been to the Cleveland Speedway or Boyd's or Atomic or North, any of these racetracks, you get there and the racetrack is perfectly dry, and for the next 3 or 4 hours, the track people put water on it. Tell them why they wet the track down, because it gets really, really slick when that red clay gets all that water on it. So tell us why that happens.
Okay. I'm going to talk about a guy named Bud Lunsford. If anybody's ever raced before, they know Bud Lunsford. Well, Bud Lunsford built a racetrack called Lanier Raceway. And if you think you only water the racetrack on Saturday, you're wrong. Bud put 120,000 gallons of water on his racetrack each week before he raced. He would put 20,000 on Wednesday. He'd put 20 to 40 on Thursday. And Friday, he would turn the track a little bit and let it sit. And then Saturday was the day he saturated the track with the water. And then everybody came in and ironed it out. And the reason you do that is so you don't get the dust. I think around 1970, the federal government mandated that you could not use calcium anymore in preparing the racetrack to keep the dust down. So they went to other things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just living by the racetrack in a way is that on Sunday morning there's a lot of mud on the road because they take the mud out of the track, and but that track is slick. I mean, it's extremely slick. I mean, but is there any reason? Do they want it slick so you can slide sideways around the curves?
Or is it just for dust?
Well, it's mainly for the dust. I think it makes short track, dirt track racing a lot harder to do than asphalt racing. Chattanooga International Speedway, which was Boyd Speedway, was the exact same surface every week. But with the weather being the way it is, no matter how much water you put on Cleveland Speedway, from one Saturday night to the next, it may be a completely different racetrack. But you would. That's why you did the hot laps. So you could get out there and feel out where the slick spots were, where the holes were, the stuff like that.
Where the new lump was.
Where the new lump was.
And definitely, there's mud falls off, and then it gets built, and so the tracks are not just perfectly smooth.
Oh, good grief, no. You can see it from the stands. A lot of racetracks, you can see the grooves, but they go with the track. They don't go across the track.
Right.
You try to make the grooves go with the track so that it's always moving you forward. It's not moving you side to side, because you can, if you been down a road that's got grooves to it, it'll almost control the car. Mm-hmm. So if the grooves were across the racetrack, then you'd have trouble keeping the car straight.
Terry, were you ever over at the Cleveland Speedway when the big ambulance got out and would run around the track?
No.
No, okay.
No.
We've had people tell us that they had some big, I don't know what kind of ambulance it was. It was hearse.
Yeah,
had big V8 engine in it, and so when in between the races, it'd get out on the track.
They'd have a couple of them out there, and they would just run
so
each
you
other.
have just for fun.
At Dixie Speedway to this day in Woodstock, they won't be doing it at night, but every week there's like 5 or 6. They've got these old cars, and they're just junk cars. but they're generally big model V8s, and they'll cut the wheel wells out of them and put the racing tires on there, more surface. Racing tires not good enough to race with anymore, but it's good enough for them to just ride around and flatten out the dirt on the racetrack. And there'll be 5 or 6 of them out there, trucks, cars. It used to be a show down at East Alabama Motor Speedway in Phoenix City, because that racetrack, I mean, it would stay slick no matter what. But these guys would get out there and just slide, just putting on a show, just for the fans.
All right, now let me ask you about the show. NASCAR's got very, very polite now. You know, you can't say darn or shucks or anything like that. You get fined, and definitely can't hit anybody in the head like the Bobby Allison days. But at dirt tracks around there, I think there was 2 things people come to see more than racing. One was the wrecks, and the other was the fights. Terry, did you ever get in a fight?
I've been in 3 or 4 scuffles.
And what was you fighting about, Terry?
Well, the first fight was just over some wide wheels. You know, we was up there getting our money, you know, after the race, and somebody said something about the wide wheels that was on their car, you know, and he kept on, so we finally tangled.
So you just hit him, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I tackled him pretty good.
Did anybody just hit you?
Oh yeah.
So it's always better when you just hit them first, though, Terry. I found out. Yeah. What do you think about all that, Mike?
There's a racetrack near Winder called Winder Barrow Speedway, and the old saying about Winder Barrow Speedway is you go to a fight and a race breaks out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it has gotten pretty serious, because at Dixie Speedway this year, they had a boy go after this is on the racetrack. Guy spun somebody out, wrecked him, essentially. And the boy retaliated. But when he retaliated, he turned the other guy over.
Mm-hmm.
They had both of the kids put in jail. And that kind of thing can't go on. I don't mind the fights. It's always a little bit one-sided when guys are big like Luther Carter or Leon Sales, somebody like that. You know not to get in a fight with them until you're so mad you'd fight a grizzly bear. But in general, most of the time nowadays, it's a pretty gentlemanly thing until you get into the heat of the battle. When you get out on the racetrack and you're running for number 1 and somebody pushes you out of the groove, and if you could have stayed in the groove, you know good and well you could have won. The heat of the battle is you might come back at him. But there's a lot of guys that'll do it in a heartbeat. And you got to look at where they were born and raised. Mike Head, you've probably heard of Mike Head. Mike Head was born into what was called Cabbagetown in Atlanta. And the saying was about people in Cabbagetown, by the time they were old enough to get out of high school, which they generally did not, they were either in prison, dead, or in the service somewhere fighting for the government. You know, that was just the way it was. Mike Head came out of life fighting, and he just wound up taking it to the racetrack. And he got a little rough on the racetrack sometimes. He's calmed down quite a bit now. As a matter of fact, he is part of the motorsports ministry down at Atlanta Motor Speedway.
You know, I know here in Cleveland, 2 things that I remember a lot was that, of course, there'd be some real dramatic wrecks. If you wrecked on the north end, turn 3 and 4, there was always, as a kid saying is, if they go out of the track, they'll go out into Candy's Creek. And that was
the
always,
creek's quite a bit from there.
It was nowhere close to the creek, but everyone said, oh, he went into the creek. And then, of course, is when the fights broke out. And the other thing I remember a lot was that there was no infill wall. The pits were just wide open. And if you got hit coming around out of turn 4 and you lost control, you went into the pits, which could mean you tore up other cars and up on trailers and different things, and you'd see people running. And of course, it's just great entertainment, though, you know. But they do have a wall now to stop you from, I think, at Cleveland now to keep from going there. And
I think in the late 40s and early 50s or mid 50s even, some of the entertainment there at the racetrack was the promotions. And then I know down at Cleveland they had a pillowcase. However much money you could get in the pillowcase, if you could carry it from the pits up to the flagman stand, you got to keep it. And one of the Evans boys brought me a picture of his dad carrying that pillowcase, and he said they counted change for the rest of the weekend, and it was over $1,000. And at that time, that was a lot of money, but most of it was pennies. And there were wash tubs, if you could carry the wash tub full of money, and they were always trying to get the women out driving the cars. And
oh yeah,
and
the
I
powder
think that
puffs.
was,
We got a good story. My dad was a musician. He wasn't a racer, but when they opened the racetracks here in Cleveland, they used to have dances afterwards, and they'd have them up on the roof of the old concession stand. My dad played. That's where I learned a lot about it. He played music there. And our friend Doc German talking about God didn't have trophies. Doc doesn't have any of his either.
Well, he
never sold
one.
his. He'd give them to the women.
The pretty girls liked them.
So, yeah, that's so.
Missy always told me he gave his to the kids.
Oh.
He was a happily married man.
Yes.
But the real story, there was a driver out of Knoxville named Claude Lay, and I talked to his son C.L. Lay years ago, and he gave me a picture of his dad winning at a racetrack in Ashburn. Is there an Ashburn outside of Knoxville? Little quarter-mile asphalt track. He had a sack of groceries in his hand. That's what he won for winning the race that night, was a sack of groceries.
Well, I bet some days that'd been good. Now, final question here, then we got to get going, is that dirt track racing is in a decline right now. I mean, you go to some of the tracks, they're not getting the crowds, they're not getting the cars. We talked to a little 22-year-old boy down here not a couple of weeks ago, and he has a little bitty Honda that they race. I don't know what class you call that, but I mean it's just a little bitty car, and he says, and he goes to track, and there's a handful of kids and people come race those, and he says that the drivers laugh at him. He says, but that's all I can afford. He said, I want to race. He said, and you see down Boyd,
and he pulls it in on a regular trailer like you'd carry lawnmowers.
There are people driving tractor trailers coming out in this modified class now. How are these guys affording to do this? I mean, you know, the sponsors are not paying that kind of money in that level, are they? Or how's the dirt track going to remain?
It's really hard. I don't really see it remaining. I really don't. Not like it is. It has to change. And I've been to about 4 different racetracks already, five or six different racetracks already this year. The only successful racetracks I've seen this year is Boyd's out here, where Gar Dixon works at it, and Dixie Speedway, where Mickey Swims works at it. Not on Saturday when he runs, but from Monday through Saturday he works at it, and so does Gar. That's the only way they're going to be able to be successful. These people that think you can show up Saturday morning, throw open the gates, and put a little water on track and go out there and race, those people are not going to last. It is a really hard business. You can become a multimillionaire, successful person, like Mickey Swims at Dixie Speedway, owns 2 racetracks, probably makes more money with a landfill than he does a racetrack, so he says. But it's really hard. I don't really see it continuing. There's going to be a garage door slammed in somebody's face that's going to start it. You got these guys like
Cleveland's in bankruptcy here.
Well, all of them are.
Oh, well, are they?
If you look at all of them, other than Gar over here at Boyd's, and you know, most tracks they just are barely getting by. The insurance is killing them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by the way, whether you know it or not, Cleveland Speedway will pay a insurance policy today. I don't care whether they run or not. They have to pay the policy today, and that's what kills them. All the money they spend on promotions, it's wasted because they won't get the first ticket sold today. Mm-hmm. So they spent like what, $4,000 or $5,000, and they don't get a penny of it back. And you know how it was earlier in the year. How are these guys going to do it? And a lot of them are just mortgaged to the hilt. Mm-hmm. It's very, very hard to do. I don't see how it can continue. What? We've got to go back to what it was in the beginning. Take it when Mr. Boyd built that little quarter-mile racetrack, and you get these little kids that can't afford to buy the big cars. Have just a strictly mini stock track that doesn't run anything but like 3 or 4 classes of mini stocks, because that's all the kids drive anyway. Make them pay $5 a head to get in. The cheapest track I've been to right now is Dixie Speedway, and he has anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 people in the grandstands each week. But most racetracks charge you $15 a head to get in now.
Yeah, I think Boyd's 10 right now.
Boyd's is,
I think Cleveland's down to 10 too. I'm not sure.
You have to get it to where people can afford. Can you imagine a married man with his wife and 3 kids going to a racetrack on a regular weekly salary? I just can't imagine doing it. And plus, why go when you've got television sitting in your home? Your kids have PlayStation or phones that they can play PlayStation on. Why spend the extra money that they've already spent for this other entertainment to go outside?
Yeah. Let me ask you, when Terry, back when you were running, I think there was only like 3 classes. They was the fast class, the middle class, and then in the hobby.
And the beginners.
Yeah, the beginners. And that was it. There was 3 classes.
That's it.
Now they're at Boyd's.
7.
Yeah, there are 7 classes.
7, yeah.
And, you get to one class and there are only 6 guys in the heat race. And 6 guys in the heat race, it's just not the same as on a short track. When you got 20 on a short track, man, that's busy. I mean, that's and then you get into a finale and you got 30 cars on a 3/8 class. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on.
You talk to Mr. Perkle, and Mr. Perkle will tell you real quick. His, I guess, point right now is Chase Elliott. He follows Chase wherever he goes.
Yes.
All right.
Won his first race when we were down in Dawsonville, matter of fact.
Okay.
Canada.
The race he ran at Gresham Motorsports Park was a 100-lap race. It was in honor of his grandfather, George Elliott. It was the George Elliott Memorial 100-lap race. On a half-mile racetrack, they started 10 cars. I mean, in 20 laps, they were just strung out to the point that you could have walked across the racetrack between the race cars. Now, they held the World Crown back 1st of August. 300-lap race, paying $20,000 to win. They started 23 cars, completely different scenario. But you can't do that every week. You can't pay $20,000 to win every week, but you almost have to for anybody to make any money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, racers, most even short track racers are professional racers, but most of them are making money. The only way they're making money is they've got somebody, Bubba Pollard, who is racing. He's a winning race driver. He came in second in the World Crown 300, but he has Jegs. Auto parts?
Yeah.
Jegs Auto Parts behind him. They pay for all this stuff, the truck, the trailer, all the stuff inside the truck, the trailer. They pay for the car. They pay the whole 9 yards. And Bubba races it with their name on the car. He represents Jegs at the racetrack. That's the only way they're making money.
Now, all these big guys can't have that. They just got to put a lot of money into it. That's their hobby.
There's no way in the world anybody can make enough money at a regular job, and I don't count bank robbery as a regular job, to put a car on the
Unless
racetrack.
you're good at it.
Even good bank robbers don't make that much money nowadays, unless you're part of Wall Street. But you cannot. There's no one person by himself can put a top-notch late model on the dirt track now, or even on asphalt.
That's what we hear over and over again from the people that are racing or the people that no longer race, is that it just became too expensive of a hobby.
Folks, that's been a great show. We got to go here. We always say is that, and we'll tell all the racing people, anybody is that you got to save this history. It may be gone someday. Dirt track racing may be gone. The store where you bought your groceries from a little boy, you're probably already gone now. You've got to get those old pictures from out from under the bed, now the closet, now the drawers. You got to get your aunts and uncles and grandparents to tell you who's in those pictures and get the names on them. Shame at the great pictures we find who have no idea who they are. We'll always remember Pearl Harbor, folks, but we may not remember what happened on your street and in your family. It's up to you. You've got to do it. You can even take your cell phone out now and record your grandpa. The technology is available. We'll see you next week. Deb, what's on?
Someone told us the other day that we'll always remember Pearl Harbor, but we remember your Aunt Pearl. Next week we have P-Dab and his aunt coming on. See you next week. I'll go on for just a second. Car show out at Westwood today until 3 p.m. and polo matches down at Bendabout tomorrow at 2 p.m. They'd love to have you come down. It's free and open to the public. If it's raining hard, I'm sure they will not have it.
Go to YouTube and type in Bendabout Polo, and you'll see a little video we did for the farm down there, the polo matches, and gives you an idea how much fun that is. I was just amazed how tremendously fun that is.
And Mike Bell's email address is
Mike, M-I-K-E-G-A, racing at gmail.com.
And if you've got information for him or questions for him, you can contact him. And we'll see you next week on the radio.
Terry, get your
thanks.
homework started. Get those pictures. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week, folks.
I don't know why everybody listens to Whoop Radio. Oh, yeah, Matador's on there. He's real smart.